Shot up house is the price for screwing with retirement, posted by Throw Me Away for Ready. Sorry for the throwaway, but this situation is still within the statute of limitations and goes across state lines in the USA. Names have been changed to protect the parties that need protection and to conform with the rules of Reddit. So our cast is: Jim and Betty are the owners of the property. Kirsten is the daughter, or me in this case. Tilda is Betty's sister, and Larry is Tilda's husband. Sonny, Larry Jr., and Mike are Larry and Tilda's children. Backstory: many years ago in rural Appalachia and coal country lived a cluster of families on a holler. Jim and Betty owned a mobile home and had their daughter Kirsten with them. This mobile home was 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom, but it was sufficient enough for shelter. During the middle of 1980s, a recession hit Appalachia hard, and Jim found work in another part of the country. In moving, he approached Larry and Tilda to look after the mobile home and collect rent for anyone that wanted to lease the mobile home. A rent amount was agreed to and would be adjusted for inflation and the cost of living for the area. The money was to be deposited into a savings account except for the money needed for necessary repairs and receipts kept. Jim and Betty trusted their siblings with this and moved, trusting that this money would be part of their retirement fund. I was privy to these conversations, but did not pay that much attention to them at the time. Shortly after leaving Appalachia, a renter was found, and Jim and Betty were glad to know that something was coming about from the land in their home area. Then, Mike moved into their mobile home, and Jim stipulated that the rental agreement did not change, even with his nephew renting the mobile home. After Mike moved out, Sonny moved in and stayed for several years. Betty asked Tilda several times about the rent, knowing Sonny was very unreliable with rent in the past and was assured that between Section 8 and food stamps that the rent was being paid on time and there were no issues. A few repairs had been done, but the receipts were stored in the safety deposit box where the savings account was. Fast forward a few more years. Sonny finally moves out and there are a few more renters, and then the taxes are not getting paid. The mobile home will not pass for Section 8 any longer. As we, Jim, Betty, and I, have been told repairs have been made over the years, we find this odd and inquire again to Tilda, who states that this was all just a misunderstanding. Once again, Betty trusts her sister and is relieved when we get the tax receipt in the mail. This is very important later. Another few years pass and Tilda dies. Jim and Betty attend the funeral, and Betty makes a gesture to assist with some of the expenses. Larry agrees, and Betty requests access to the savings account that should have at least tens of thousands of dollars by this point, not including interest, to only find out it has never existed. All of the paperwork has been fraudulent or forged. Remember that tax receipt? Another forgery. Betty refused to fight. She had just lost her sister. Still, Jim is livid, as am I. Sonny was always abusive to me, and to find out she had been living off my parents for free while receiving Section 8 for rent and getting food stamps sent me over the edge, on top of the missing retirement funds. Cue revenge. So, knowing everything was fraudulent from the beginning, Jim and I attempted legal means first to get revenge on this thief. We were met with walls of red tape, and with states separating us, it was an uphill battle with a slim chance of winning. Plus, the attorney fees would drain any winnings and then more. First, I put my piece into action. Against Sonny, I filed claims of fraud against the Section 8 anonymously and SNAP benefits, given that there was absolutely no proof of rent being paid to the homeowner or the custodian. Larry was stupid enough not to write out a fraudulent receipt for when his daughter lived there. Next, I filed against Larry for tax evasion and Social Security fraud, since Sonny was claiming to be paying him the rent money via Section 8. This was income. Since he was not claiming this income on his tax forms, he was double dipping into the Social Security system and avoiding paying taxes. I did the same for the time Mike was paying rent, although he did not claim government benefits, he just paid rent. The next stage was to notify their local church about the shady dealings with family. Their faith is big on lay ministers and credibility. I told anyone and everyone I could from the church directory about what had happened. I even showed the fake tax receipt. The last bit was the most nefarious. After ensuring that Larry was visiting Sonny and the house that he owned was empty, a rented car was used, and while Betty drove, Jim used a .22 rifle to shoot holes in the roof, the AC compressor, the garage doors, and anything that was laying in the yard and not immediately noticeable. We wanted the burn to last, so no windows were shot out or anything evident from the start showed. Aftermath. Sonny is now being investigated for multiple charges of fraud. Her side business has been closed due to the sweeping allegations that money will not be allocated as intended. Her applications for small business loans and COVID funds have been denied. Criminal charges are being whispered, but I do not think that anything will come about with that portion. Larry has been found guilty of overpayment by the Social Security Administration and no longer receives benefits. He now lives with Sonny and no longer has his truck, his camper, boat, or ATVs. Unfortunately, once again, criminal charges are not pending. Larry Jr. has moved into the old home that was shot up. The roof had several places where hail or other debris punched through and made it leak. The siding had similar damage. Some of the bullets, and they finally figured out what it was, pierced some of the old PVC and plastic plumbing. He has spent a fortune fixing the roof, the plumbing, and the siding where a lot of little holes were. I don't know if he's tried the AC yet, and I will be delighted to find out if it malfunctions as severely as I hope. Funny comment and answer here from OP. Says, which side was Hatfield and which ones are the McCoys? Man, you all there hold a grudge longer than the Italians and the Irish in East Coast cities. And OP replies, funny thing is, my family has both clans intermixed. Betty's side is Hatfield and Jim's side is McCoy. I mean, you don't screw with someone that is entrusting with their retirement funds. That's a huge step and really just going out on a branch of trust there. And then to find out the account never existed. That is your future. That is your livelihood when you are not working anymore. And to have it all just ripped and torn out from under your feet is so wrong by those you've entrusted it with. So, to go on and destroy them legally for tax evasion and not paying the rent properly, doing nothing right by Section 8, and then destroying the house in a way that is not easily repaired, that will last for years, cost a ton of money, and give them a ton of grief and just annoyance over time, that is true nuclear revenge, to take their lives and just completely get them what they deserve. Let me know what you think. Way to go, OP. Half-brothers threatened to sue me over $16,000. It cost them $158,000 and possibly their parents' marriage. Posted by Deleted. When I, 25-year-old female, was 3, my grandparents passed away. They set up a savings account in my name, and the account was meant to be accessed by me when I was 21. At that point, it contained just over $300,000. My grandparents left me a letter saying that they would like me to share the money fairly with any other Smith-Jones children, meaning my full siblings, Dad's a Smith and Mom's a Jones. By fairly, they meant that they wanted me to assess the situation and judge for myself what was fair. I never had full siblings, but I have 2 half-brothers, Mac and Joe Smith, who are Dad and Stepmom's kids. Due to the specific wording my grandparents used, I legally never had to give Mac or Joe any money. However, I see Mac and Joe as my brothers, and as the money came from our grandparents, I felt that the fairest thing to do would be to assign each of us $100,000, so we each all got an equal-sized lump sum. And I figured that when Mac, the youngest, turned 21 and took his $100,000, we could split any remaining money. When I turned 21, Dad suggested that I buy a house with my $100,000. I found a place that I loved, but it was $130,000 and I couldn't get a mortgage, so Dad said, well, I should borrow $30,000 from the account. I did, figuring I could pay it back before my brothers turned 21, and I have been repaying it. The account should be at $208,000 right now, but due to me withdrawing and then repaying that money, it's at $195K, so I still owe $13,000. Joe turned 21 recently, and as I was giving him his $100,000, Joe noticed that there was less in the account than there should be. I explained, and I said that I was going to put it all back before Mac, now 19, turns 21. Joe told Mac, and both boys said that I stole from them and owed them the full $13,000 back, plus $3,000 of interest that they felt they would have gotten, and they wanted it all paid by this summer, which gave me less than 6 months to bring up the account to $211,000. I said I'd do it, but over 2 years as planned. The boys then wrote up a contract to that effect. I went to sign it until I saw that it said 6 months to pay it all back. I wouldn't sign as we agreed on 2 years. They said that I should figure it out as they were entitled to that money and would be seeking legal advice. Later that day, I got an email clearly written by them saying that they intend to sue me for the $16,000 plus whatever is currently in the account and additional damages and emotional distress on top of that. At this point in time, I'd given Joe about $50,000 of his $100,000 because he wanted it in installments. I responded that legally they were never entitled to any of it, and given their attitudes, I'd say they've already received an amount that I deem fair, so that $50K was all they were getting. I then got a barrage of texts and calls and emails yelling at me for going back on our deal, and I blocked them. They then took to social media, saying that I was trying to screw them out of their inheritance and rallying our extended family into harassing me over this, and it mostly worked as a lot of people messaged me. However, I got a message from this guy called Chris Smith. Chris said that he was 27 and claimed to be my half-brother. I had never met him before, but he sent me photos of him as a kid with our dad, our grandparents, and me. He showed me that he also had an account with $150K in it and a scan of a letter from our grandparents saying this money was meant to be shared fairly among Dad's illegitimate children. Chris also told me that we have another half-sibling who is 18. He'd been looking for me for a while, but only found me when Dad shared Joe's post, which had me tagged. We checked with the solicitor to make sure, and as the boys are legitimate, they aren't entitled to anything in Chris's illegitimate kid fund. And as they are my half-siblings, they aren't entitled to anything in my Smith-Jones kids fund either. I sent the boys a letter formally telling them to back off, stop posting about me online, and enjoy the $50K because it's all they're getting. The day they received the letter, Chris got a private message from Dad asking if the boys can have some of Chris's fund. Chris also said no and told Dad that we had met. I told Mac and Joe about Chris and the other half-sibling with Chris's permission. So it looks like my grandparents, knowing about Chris before they passed, set up 2 funds. One for the kids that Dad had with my mother, who was still his wife when they passed, and one for children born out of Dad's affairs, presumably to make sure that no one tried to screw anyone else over out of hurt feelings. I'm getting a lot of crap, but I'm holding firm on my decision. The boys have realized that I won't back down on this, and it sounds like I've caused a schism at their house, as Joe has all the money and no intention of sharing, so Mac is now feeling twice as screwed. Plus, Stepmom apparently didn't know about the other half-siblings, or that my half-sister was born after she and Dad got married, and she's made Dad move into a hotel. It sounds like Dad is looking for a long-term living arrangement outside of the family home because it looks like she is not letting him move back in. Dad is begging me to reconsider, but honestly, I'm done with all of them except Chris and my sister. I mean, holy cow, when someone passes away, you would think that everything goes smoothly and everyone just comes together as a family. But when inheritance and money are involved, people get nasty, unfortunate as it may be. So these guys think they're entitled to this, but they're not. And now they're throwing a fit because OP originally had a plan that never was legally binding, and now they're mad. And now they're trying to get into the other fund that they're not supposed to be? Hey look, I know your feelings are hurt because you thought you were getting this money, and you know what? You acted really rude to OP, and then this whole thing just blew up in your face, and now look where you are. Wow, this could really go some different ways, so I'm super curious to know what you think. Also, way to go OP. Online Fraud Revenge, posted by Deleted. This story is about 15 years old, so some of the details may have gotten lost, but it's a good, real pro-revenge story. Hope you like it. Back in the day, there was a certain online retailer notorious for allowing, by default, differing shipping and billing addresses. They would also ship merchandise to one address and then send the bill to the different billing address, no questions asked. Very unethical, but they collected enough from their victims to continue operating, I guess. One day, I find in the mail one of these bills sent to me by my name at my address for several $100s of exercise equipment, of which I had zero previous knowledge. Part of my job at the time was to persuade folks in person or over the phone to give me information, and I was reasonably good at it. It took me 3 calls to the nefarious retailer before I managed to get a rapport with one of their employees. I sensed the connection and let myself speak freely, and eventually this woman's conscience got the better of her, and she conceded that the retailer was knowingly perpetrating these frauds on a massive scale in concert with many scammers who knew the vendor had no qualms about its evil business practices. She gave me the purchaser's phone number. I still remember the scumbag's name, but I won't use it here. I placed my call, posing as an employee of the vendor trying to clear up a mix-up that was delaying delivery of the items to the purchaser. In an unbelievably fortunate event, buyer's daughter answered the phone. It sounded about 10 to 12. Nice kid. Sweetie, blah blah blah, we would love for you to get your shipment, but we are having some issues with your shipping address. We are so sorry for the delay, blah blah blah. Can I speak to your daddy? Dad isn't home. Well, I'd hate for him not to get his stuff. Can you help me out? This kid is eating out of my hand by then. I feel a bit bad about deceiving her, but you can't keep your filthy deeds from involving your family ever, so here we go. I get the name and the address. Google Maps, or some other mapping service, as I'm not even sure it was a Google Maps at the time, shows a pizza joint around the corner, and I stare balefully at the rectangle representing the house. One more thing, sweetie. You've been a big help to your dad. Can you give him a message for me? Tell him it was a nice try. He'll understand. Thank you. Bye. Place another call to the retailer armed with the order number. Since they don't care about any of this, and the shipping and billing addresses now match, they change the billing name and address just like that. I grill the operator about the changed info and am assured that they will now bill the shippee. I still have no idea how someone completely unknown to me in upstate New York got my address on the opposite side of the country. Still smug for months. So this story is interesting because what this is actually social engineering, where you pretend to be someone else or you establish rapport with the customer service agent, make friendliness, and then use that to get access to someone's account or to do something nefarious. Now I know OP was getting revenge here, but something about this social engineering thing, I wish it was done another way. I don't like the idea of social engineering, but OP did it, and I'm very curious what you think as well. HOA president tries to arrest me for following his rules, so I have him kicked off the board. Click the video on the screen, you don't want to miss this crazy fallout and twist, and I'll see you there.